Today, we're going to talk about watching what you say, something I have some trouble with from time to time. But anyway, we're going to get into that in a little bit. I was thinking about my old house in Rochester, New Hampshire, and living up there. And I remember this time when the neighborhood kids in our condo association would come together and get themselves into trouble. And I remember one particular year, it was like probably the first real snowstorm of the year. We had like some snow embankments and everything that were forming. And the kids were out behind the snow embankments, and they were throwing snowballs into the street at the cars, actually. And I remember them hitting my car with a snowball, and I was thinking, oh, that's really, dangerous. It's bad because, they could block someone's vision or something. But I was turning into the condo association, and I had pulled over at the offices for some reason. I can't remember why. But anyway, the kids were laughing and thought it was really funny and everything. And then they picked the wrong car. They picked the wrong car. There was a big truck coming down, and they threw snowballs at it, and they were laughing, and they didn't read the license plate, but the license plate that the person had said insane on it. That was their license plate. And I heard this screeching noise, and this giant full-size pickup truck with insane on the license plate came tearing into the condo association and zooming up and down the driveway, trying to find these kids, and they were scattering to the four winds. You know what I mean? They were running for it, and they wouldn't leave, and they were screaming out the window. So I had to call the police, actually. But sometimes we do things that we think are funny or we think that are fine, and we don't really think about the ramifications of what we've done or what's going to happen as a result of our decisions, or as a result of things that we say or do. And that incident made me think of an incident in the Bible, actually, from 2 Kings 2:23 and through 25. It's probably one of the weirder things that's in the Bible, but it goes to show you they could have never possibly imagined what they were getting themselves in for. So in 2 Kings 2:23 through 25, it says, "Then he went up from there to Bethel." This is Elisha the prophet, okay? This is the guy who took the mantle from Elijah. Elijah had gone up into heaven, and Elisha had taken his place as the prophet of the Lord in the land of Israel. And he leaves after taking up the mantle, and he's walking on his way up to Samaria. And this is what happens. So he's walking up there to Bethel. And as he was going up, by the way, young lads came out from the city and mocked him and said to him, "Go up, you bald head. Go up, you bald head." And when he looked behind him, he saw them. He cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then two female bears came out of the woods and tore up 42 lads of their number. He went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he turned to Samaria. So all in a day's work, It's just kind of a matter of fact. I think some Bibles call them she-bears. Sounds worse that way. I don't know why. But two female bears come up and tear them to pieces and eat them and whatever. But now a lot of folks say Elisha must have been pretty bad, pretty terrible, calling on the name of the Lord and sending ferocious she-bears to eat children. Because they were making fun of his baldness. But we should also remember that the Lord would not answer Elisha's call if it was petty or vindictive or something of this nature. The Lord is holy. Okay, so what's going on here? Sometimes things are not all they appear to be just from reading a statement like that. So Elisha's probably by himself or with one or two companions, and they're just walking down the road, and then some young guys, some young men, start coming out of this city. And I don't know if you've ever felt afraid, okay? I used to be a fraud investigator, like and I went to interview a lady once in a trailer park, and she had all the local teenagers at her house, and they were all doing drugs and heroin and all this stuff, you know. And we knocked on the door. I was with an agent actually, and we asked to meet them anyway. And she came, and then around her, all these kids, like 16, 17 years old, all started like filling in and pouring in and like staring at us and looking at us like, what are you doing, you know? You don't belong here. And I started to feel pretty intimidated. Like, where are all these teens here? There's probably 20 teens. So we don't know how many of them there were. All right. So if you were thinking about this that way, you're thinking of maybe 60, 70, who knows how many of them there are. But basically it's a gang of thugs that are probably Baal worshipers, okay? Most people in Israel at the time worshiped Baal, and they hated God. And they hated Elijah, who was a prophet of God. And they said, go on up, you bald head. Now, what had just happened with Elijah is he had gone up into heaven, right? So they might have been saying to him, why don't you go kill yourself? Or why don't you get out of here? You know, leave, die. And so you have a big gang of youths calling you names and telling you that you should die. And I would think that's pretty intimidating, walking up behind you. So he probably was afraid for his life. And just like Elisha called down fire from the heavens and burned up all these groups of 50 soldiers at a time, Elisha, prays to God, and she-bears come out of the forest and eat some people. So they couldn't have possibly imagined that that was going to be what happened. But that's what happened because of their attitude and how they were acting. And sometimes we don't realize that when we do something that we shouldn't do, we provoke an action that is far and away beyond anything we could possibly imagine. You know, I think it was last month, they sentenced a guy that had killed somebody because they got in a fight over a parking space. You know, he got in a fight with this woman who was parked in a handicap spot, I think, and the boyfriend came out and he's like, "Why are you yelling at my girlfriend?" And I think he might have pushed him or something, and then the guy just pulled out a gun and shot him dead. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. You know, when you react in a negative or a bad way, and it's just something that we should really think about in our actions every day, how we deal with people, right? Had those children that were Baal worshipers gone to Bible class, they probably know it was inadvisable to make fun of a prophet of God and threaten him with death. And you know, maybe if these kids that were throwing snowballs at a truck that said insane on it had gone to Bible class, they would realize what happens when you pick on the wrong people. Bad things happen sometimes, and we just, can never know what is going to come of how we act. It can be 100 times worse than we could possibly think. So, people's disrespect, their angry words, really lead to greater consequences than we can imagine. I was thinking about also that it's not just about, hey, if you make fun of somebody or if you cut somebody off, they could try to kill you and run you off the road, or all these other horrible things that happen because people lose their tempers. But there's a lot of other bad things that happen when we make bad choices, when we contribute to, let's say, the circle of badness, that just seems to be around all the time. When you do bad things, when you contribute to bad things, then bad things you will reap. And if you went to the Wednesday night class, we've been studying the Proverbs, and it's like one after another talks about how all these folks that do evil reap evil. And if they make poor and wrong decisions, then they're going to reap death. That's going to happen. Like they're going to die for those bad decisions. And they may not realize it at the time, but that's what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of things that happen that we don't realize are happening. When we're scoffing, when we're making fun of people, when we're saying mean things about people that we don't like, we're bringing condemnation on ourselves. And that's not just from a physical standpoint, whereas I could die or something, but that's from a spiritual standpoint as well. You know, as you can imagine, God is not cool with people that are mean and make fun of other people, you know. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that you will give grace to those who hear." And then this next one is about somebody that's just plain mean and ornery, right? "Reject a factious man after a first and second warning, knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned," right? So when you think about these passages here, we get the sense that God doesn't want us to be mean and nasty to each other, right? He doesn't want us to be complaining and factious. That means to just argue with people just for no reason, no good reason at all, just to do it. I don't know if you've ever run into anybody like that, but once in a while you'll run into somebody that no matter what you say, they're going to disagree with what you said. You know, there's people that are just like that, and they thrive on it. You know, they're like, yeah, this is awesome. I get to, you know, ruin somebody else's day, and that makes me feel a whole lot better. And that's what they're talking about here. These things are sins, you know, because we shouldn't be going around making fun of people or ruining their day or calling them bad things or talking behind their back or any of those things. Those are just not things that God wants us to do. And if we do them, you know, then we're at odds with the Bible. We're sinning, right? We're doing something that is evil in God's sight. And our speech and what we say to other people is important, not only because we could pay for it physically, like being attacked by she-bears, but also because we're going to pay for it spiritually, right? Look at he says here in Titus 3:10 and 11, "Reject a factious man after a first and second warning." I mean, you tell him, you know, stop, knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned. He's sinning and he's condemning himself to death, right? That's what he's doing. And he doesn't, you know, maybe he doesn't see it, but it's not a good thing to do. So not only do our words condemn us to sin, but they cause harm to other people too, right? They do bad things to people. And I know that when I was a kid, they're like, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but will never hurt me." You know, I don't know how many times I heard that when I was a kid, probably like a billion. Or what, you know, "I'm rubber and you're glue, whatever you say bounce off me and sticks to you." Everybody heard that one? So, right. So, but that's not true, is it? We like to say those things because we're like, you know, grow a thick skin and you can't hurt me and blah, blah, blah. But really, saying mean and hurtful things and gossiping about people, talking behind their back, that hurts people. Right, that hurts people on a foundational level. You know, a lot of people, they charged this girl from Massachusetts with, I think it was negligent homicide, because she convinced her boyfriend to kill himself. She just kept telling him, "You should kill yourself, you should kill yourself, you should kill yourself." And you know what he did? He killed himself. And I believe she was convicted too. So, you know, what we say to people, especially if they're in a fragile state of mind, can be really damaging. And we really should think about that before we say it, right? And some people say, well, I was mad or I was angry. I had righteous indignation. You know, what is righteous indignation? Well, basically it means that you're angry because you were right and you were offended. Like you feel like your sense of justice has been infringed. You know, like your neighbor raked up the leaves and pushed the pile into your yard, and you know they blew all over your yard. That would cause righteous indignation. You're angry at them because you feel slighted by them in some way. But that is not justification. That is not what God says. You know what? You can get angry at somebody who does something wrong to you. You know, an eye for an eye and the whole world goes blind, right? That's not what Jesus teaches in the Bible. is not, it's forgive your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, right? So righteous indignation isn't righteous. It's not a thing, right? It says in Leviticus 19:18, and this is also in Romans too, right? Romans, like near the end of the book somewhere, I can't remember exactly, but it says, "You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord," right? So that's what he's saying, right? Don't hold a grudge. Don't get angry at people. Don't lose your temper and try to kill people because you're mad at them. He says forgive them, right? Basically love them. Love your neighbor as yourself. How would you want to be treated? Treat others the way you want them to treat you. With respect, with love, with kindness, even if they don't deserve it, right? So anger, careless words, seeking out our own revenge, being contentious, all these things hurt people. And you know what? It doesn't just extend to our immediate sphere of people, like, saying something to somebody to my left or to my right, but it extends to the whole church. It poisons everybody in the whole group, in the whole church, everybody that we come together with. Being an angry, mean, or contentious person permeates like a poison, like poison that's dropped into the water. It makes all of the water sick, and undrinkable. Or, we could look at it this way, the way that James puts it in James 3:4-6. He says, "Look at ships also, though they are great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder, wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things." And then he says, "See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire." Just by one little wrong, mean thing that somebody says or does, right? "And the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body, and sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell." I don't know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And then you have this, which is like totally the opposite, right? What does he say? Let's look at it again. "See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity." That sounds a lot more like worse than sticks and stones, if you ask me. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body, sets on fire the course of our life, and is set on fire by hell. So the influence of this evil speech, of these mean things that people say, of these contentious arguments that people get into, that's Satan, right? That's the devil. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to break up that church. I'm going to hurt God's people. I'm going to put out the light in that lighthouse. I'm going to put an end to that place. And you know how he does it? He gets people to pit against one another. And they don't like this person for some reason, and they get a burr under their saddle, and they go and they talk to so-and-so, and they say, this guy over here, he's got real problems, and he's a bad guy. We need to get him out of the church, or what have you. And then that person over there is also offended, and they get their little team of guys together, and then all of a sudden you have two teams of people that don't like each other, and they want to get each other out of that church. And so, you know what? Somebody wins. Well, nobody wins, really. Everybody loses. But then somebody goes and they plant some other church somewhere, and something happens, and you get all these splits. And that's something that happens around here a lot up in New England. A lot of times there's splits because somebody always loses. People need to come together and not drive each other apart, We can't set fires in the church and just watch it burn, Satan likes it, but God doesn't. God says that we should respect and love each other, that we should come together and be a strong body, that we should be, inseparable. Just like I wouldn't want to rip my arm off, we should not want anybody to leave our church. We should all want to stay here together and love each other, because this is our community. This is our support group for our beliefs and and everything that we share together. Just a couple weeks ago, we saw 2 people become members of the Lord's church. And that is a beautiful thing. And what the Lord puts together, we shouldn't take apart, right? So that's something that we should keep in mind. We should try always to love each other in spite of our weaknesses, right? And we shouldn't assume things about people because, everybody comes from different places. Everybody's got their own life story. Everybody's got all these different things going on. You can't read people's minds. You can't see in their heart, right? And that's what God said to Samuel. He said in 1 Samuel 16:7, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So God knows people's hearts. He knows their motivations. He knows, and people are answerable to God, right? They're not answerable to me or to you or to anybody else. They're answerable to God. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't call out sin when we see sin, and that we shouldn't say something is wrong or something is rotting in Denmark, right? Because you can't just allow sin to go on in the church. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about condemning people, writing them off, and saying, you know what, they're not real Christians, or whatever. Because we look at the outward appearance, we can only see the outside. God is the person who really knows that person's heart. He knows everything that they're going through. He knows everything about them. He knows about all the hairs on their head. And we don't. And that is also why when we go to somebody, that we need to go in a spirit of humility. If we're going to say, you're doing something wrong, or we want to encourage them to do something right, we need to remember that we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, that we all got stuff going on. We've all got baggage and things and secret sin, Maybe some people's sin's on the outside and people see that and they're like, hey, you don't do that. But, maybe my sin people don't see or they don't know about, right? So we all have our own issues going on. Nobody's perfect. So when we go to somebody, Jesus says, clear up your own thing first, or be humble. Remember, you've got the log in your eye when you go to try to take that speck out of your brother's eye. Remember where you're coming from, in a spirit of service and humility, right? Let's just look at what it says. Matthew 7:4-5, it says, "Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye? And he says, you hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." And that one was shot right at the Pharisees, right? Because the Pharisees were like, oh, you carried something, you did work, you're condemned, you're bad, you're evil, you need forgiveness and all this other kind of stuff. And then they're robbers and robbing temples and doing all these horrible, evil things to people and taking advantage of the poor. Talk about kicking somebody when they're down. They're doing things that are much, much worse. And they're trying to remove these little tiny infractions from the people, and they themselves are walking around with giant logs in their eyes. That's the picture that Jesus wants to convey. And we need to make sure that we're not like those Pharisees, that we've got all this sin and iniquity in our life that we haven't resolved and we're not humble about. And then we're going around pointing out all the things that everybody else is doing, right? That's not supposed to happen. And that makes sense, right? You can't allow sin to just go run freely, but you need to approach it correctly. You need to approach it with a heart of humility. We're all in this together. We should remember, first of all, we need to be diligent and think about what we say. Think before you act, or think before you speak, right? Our words can cause harm that we can't possibly imagine. It can cause physical harm to us. It can cause spiritual harm to us. Our contentious attitude can get us in trouble with God as far as our sinning against him. Our words can hurt other people. And as James said, it can hurt the entire church like a fire that is consuming a fire from hell, And that's some strong words. But you know what? When a church rips it in half. You need some strong words to address that kind of stuff. You know, it's terrible. It's awful when people leave because of disagreements and arguments and things. People are supposed to get along, right? We're supposed to encourage each other and love each other, not burn each other down. And that's what James is really trying to get at. So instead of saying things that are hateful and judgmental or harmful, we should be focusing on treating others the way that we want to be treated, right? Love one another even as I have loved you, as Jesus would say. So we should be focusing on being encouraging, and we should be focusing on reinforcing good behavior, and instead of pointing out every little thing that somebody might do that we don't necessarily think is super awesome. And we should be bearing one another's burdens. We should be loving each other with a spirit of humility and service. You know, one of the verses that always gets me, that always reminds me of the way I'm supposed to treat other people is this one. And it can be easy to forget this, you know, especially in the heat of the moment when we're thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about things that are going on with us. But this one I always think of when I deal with other people, and this is what keeps me in check. Not that I am perfect by any means. Trust me, I'm not, because I forget it often. But I read it, and I remember, and I say, oh yeah, this is the way it needs to be. And it says in Matthew 25:40, the king will answer and say to them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even to the least of them, you did it to me. So if we are doing something terrible or awful to somebody, then we're offending God. We're doing it to him. We need to remember that, right? That's just an important thing. So I want to encourage us all to love people, to treat them the way that we ought to be treated, and to make this world a little bit better place than it was before, to spread a little bit more happiness, a little bit more joy, a little bit more love and friendship. All right, at this time I'd like to extend an invitation. If you have not yet received Jesus Christ into your life, you might ask yourself if you believe in him, if you trust him with your life and you're willing to repent. It means change your life to the message of the Bible instead of your own message. And if you're willing to be baptized, if you're willing to do those things, then I want to encourage you to come forward as we stand and we sing our closing song. God is calling the prodigal.